For months, fans thought Dave Turin had walked away from the goldfields for good. He'd said it himself. He was done with TV gold. Done with the chaos, the cameras, the pressure of chasing ounces on screen. But then, something strange began showing up online. A single drone clip, posted and deleted within hours, showed what looked like Dave's red excavator parked deep inside a canyon no one could identify. No crew, no signage, no film team, just one massive machine surrounded by churned-up earth and floodlights burning through the night. If you're new here, hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear changes everything we thought we knew about Dave Turin's gold story. At first, people dismissed it. Maybe it was old footage, maybe a look-alike machine. But the details didn't fit. The paint was too fresh, the gear was upgraded, and when locals from the nearby valley started talking, the story exploded. They swore they'd seen trucks moving in at night, headlights off, hauling gear into an area with no public road access. No one knew who they were or who they worked for, but everything about it felt too coordinated, too professional to be a weekend dig. Whatever was happening out there, it wasn't some hobbyist mining a few specks for fun. It looked like a fully functioning gold operation, hidden, private, and running outside the spotlight. Then came the real clue, a license plate captured in the drone's corner frame. When fans cross-referenced it, it matched one of Turin's old support vehicles from his last lost mine project. That's when the theories began to spiral. Did Dave ever really quit? Or had he quietly shifted gears, building something bigger without the pressure of cameras or contracts? The site itself turned out to have its own story. That canyon wasn't random. It carried a name that old prospectors used to whisper about, Devil's Gate. In the late 1800s, it was home to a small mining town that vanished overnight after a landslide buried most of it under stone and mud. Historians claimed there were veins there too deep for the tools of the time to reach. Some even said gold still ran thick beneath that debris. For decades, no one dared to reopen it. The ground was too unstable, the land too remote. But Dave had mentioned, years ago in an interview most people forgot, that he believed there are places where good men gave up too soon. Now he was back. The GPS data from that drone footage lined up perfectly with the Devil's Gate coordinates. This wasn't coincidence. This was a calculated return. The same canyon that swallowed a generation of miners had drawn Turin back in. And knowing his history, this wasn't about chasing fame or filming another season. It was personal. He'd lost friends, spent years rebuilding his name, and he'd always said his dream wasn't about TV. It was about redemption through gold. But what came next pushed things even further. After his quiet exit from the spotlight, Dave went completely silent. No social media, no press, no updates. The man who used to share every ounce and milestone suddenly erased himself from the conversation. Months passed. Then, out of nowhere, a small trucking company out of Idaho posted a single photo bragging about delivering heavy wash plants to a private client. The caption seemed harmless, until someone noticed the tag location, Devil's Gate Canyon. Within hours, the post was gone. Account deleted, but screenshots had already spread. The serial numbers on the machinery matched the same make Dave used in his earlier seasons. Customized, heavy-duty gear designed for full-scale processing. This wasn't a test site. This was production. And here's where things started to snowball. A few sharp-eyed fans dug deeper and noticed the delivery route didn't pass through any open mining roads. It had been rerouted through an old logging path that hadn't been maintained in years. Someone had gone through serious effort to avoid public view, and that raised the question, if this was legal, why hide it? Industry insiders suggested one possibility. Turin might have reclaimed an old claim under a relative's or partner's name. perfectly legal if done quietly. That would let him dig without the chaos of producers, networks, or constant online speculation. It also meant he could finally mine the way he'd always wanted, on his terms, without anyone breathing down his neck. Still, even for Dave, this level of secrecy was new. And as word spread, the mystery deepened. Some former crew members refused to comment. Others simply said, "He's not done yet." And maybe they were right, because if the clues lining up at Devil's Gate are real, what Dave Turin's building out there isn't just another mining run. It's something much bigger, a hidden return to unfinished ground, buried history, and gold no one else was willing to chase. But it wasn't just rumor anymore. Quietly, in the background, paperwork began to surface. Evidence no one expected to find. County records didn't lie. Buried deep in the archive logs, a single renewal form appeared for a long-expired mining claim, filed not under Dave Turin's name, but under that of a distant relative who'd never worked a day in the industry. The signature was different, but the address on the form matched the same office once used by Turin's business manager. The date of renewal? Just 2 weeks before the drone footage first surfaced from Devil's Gate. It looked innocent on paper. Just another routine renewal, the kind small operators do every year to keep old ground in the family. But there was one detail the county clerk missed: the coordinates. They aligned almost perfectly with the same canyon Turin's excavator had been spotted in. It didn't take long for people to connect it. If that claim had been dead for years, and now it was quietly reactivated under someone close to Dave, it could only mean one thing. He'd never actually walked away. He'd just changed how he played the game. Instead of filming every move, every misstep, and every ounce on camera, Turin was now operating under the radar, rebuilding the same kind of operation that once made him famous, but without the noise of television. As those documents leaked online, small clues started surfacing everywhere. Delivery receipts for diesel fuel shipped to an unnamed location off a rural Montana highway. An insurance filing for heavy industrial equipment that was oddly generic, with no site listed. Even a small-town real estate ad mentioned an old gravel pit recently leased for resource use. None of these things, individually, proved anything, but together they painted a picture. Someone was bringing Devil's Gate back to life. Then came the spark that set the entire gold community buzzing. A weekend hiker posted a short TikTok clip showing black sand glittering along the creek bed near Devil's Gate. It lasted only 15 seconds, but the footage was clear. Thick bands of magnetite curling along the waterline. The kind of black sand any miner knows is the telltale sign of gold-rich pay streaks nearby. The caption was simple: "Found this near Devil's Gate. No idea what it is." Within hours, the post went viral among prospectors. The comments filled with speculation, some claiming it was left over from old operations, others insisting it was fresh tailings from a working wash plant upstream. But before the debate could grow, the video vanished. Deleted without warning, the account wiped clean. People assumed maybe it was a hoax, until a single comment appeared on a reposted screenshot. The username was unfamiliar, but the message hit hard. "It's real. We hit it. Don't ask questions." Then the account disappeared too. Within hours, forums lit up. People began comparing screenshots, cross-checking tree lines and river curves, trying to confirm the exact spot. The match was undeniable. It was the same creek that cut through the Devil's Gate claim. The evidence pointed to fresh activity, not erosion or leftover waste. Someone was pulling new dirt, working new layers, and everyone who'd followed Turin's career knew one thing: his crew never left a claim half-finished. When Dave said he'd done everything he could at a site, he meant every speck had been washed. So, if black sand and concentrate were surfacing again, That meant they'd found something deeper, something the old equipment couldn't reach years ago. Then another story surfaced. A group of hunters out in the backcountry claimed they'd stumbled onto something strange while following a ridge trail above Devil's Gate. They found tire tracks, not from pickup trucks or ATVs, but the deep, wide grooves of haul trucks. The tracks led off-trail into the trees and down toward the canyon. At first, they thought maybe it was logging equipment, until they saw what was sitting lower down near the clearing. Canvas tents, a line of fuel barrels, and a large blue tarp spread across a mound of gravel. They said they could hear something too, low and rhythmic, echoing faintly through the forest. It wasn't an engine idling. It was more mechanical, steady, like the repetitive churn of a wash plant cycling material. The sound carried through the trees, fading in and out with the wind, but unmistakable to anyone who's ever been near one. They didn't go closer. It was private land, and the last thing they wanted was trouble. But when they returned the next day, everything was different. The tire marks were gone, flattened and covered with fresh soil. The barrels were moved. Even the gravel pile under the tarp looked disturbed, as if someone had deliberately erased the signs of a working site. It wasn't just cleanup, it was concealment. Every trace of movement, every piece of evidence, scrubbed like it had never existed. For miners, that kind of secrecy meant only one thing: the gold was real. When a crew hides their trail that carefully, it's because the find is too valuable to risk drawing attention. Rumors spread fast in mining towns. Some said they'd heard diesel generators running late into the night. Others mentioned a low hum echoing across the canyon long after midnight. A trucker claimed he'd seen 2 semis loaded with unmarked equipment heading north from the valley. No company names, no numbers, just matte paint and covered loads. It was impossible to verify any of it, but the pattern felt too familiar. This was how Turin operated before TV ever found him. Small crew, limited noise, long hours, and absolute focus. He didn't need publicity. He needed results. The silence was part of the method. And now, that same silence was back, wrapping Devil's Gate like a veil. As investigators and enthusiasts started piecing the story together, the conclusion became harder to ignore. Someone had reopened Devil's Gate under cover of an old claim. Someone had struck pay dirt, and someone was willing to hide an entire mining camp in the woods to protect it. There were no permits, no production logs, no official reclamation files, just rumors, faint sounds, and deleted posts. But for those who knew Turin's drive, it didn't need official confirmation. The signs were all there. The man who walked away from television gold hadn't retired. He'd gone back to the kind of gold that doesn't make headlines, the kind you keep quiet until it's safely in the pan. And somewhere beyond the tree line, under the sound of turning gravel and rushing water, the ground was moving again. Then, almost as if the canyon silence had finally spoken, traces began surfacing far from the dig site. Quiet, bureaucratic fingerprints left in places no one expected to look. It started quietly, just a few numbers that didn't add up on a refinery report out of Oregon. The plant handled small-scale inputs from independent miners, but that week a shipment arrived unlike anything they'd seen in years. An unusually large load of high-purity gold dust, refined to near-perfect levels, with no claim registration attached. Every refinery keeps track of where their gold comes from, and by law, each input must tie back to an active claim number. But this one didn't. The manifest was blank, except for a freight company's label. An old contractor Dave Turin used during his earlier mining seasons for equipment hauls. The serial tag on the crate matched a format unique to that company, even using the same color code Dave had once requested for fast-track deliveries. It wasn't proof on its own, but to anyone familiar with his operation, it was too close to ignore. When analysts ran a chemical fingerprint on the dust, the mystery deepened. Every gold deposit carries a unique mineral signature, tiny trace elements in the surrounding soil that tell geologists where it came from. The lab's report showed one of the closest matches to any known sample, the soil composition from the Devil's Gate Valley. That single detail set the internet ablaze. Within hours, forums, Reddit threads, and fan pages filled with claims that Turin's secret operation wasn't just rumor anymore. It was active, producing and moving gold across state lines under private contracts. Some dismissed it as coincidence, but veteran miners recognized the telltale logistics. No small prospector moves that kind of volume unnoticed. The only ones capable of pulling it off are seasoned crews who know exactly how to keep production quiet. Tight schedules, limited access, and no electronic trails. That's when the secret operation theory caught fire. People started revisiting old interviews, mining footage, and forgotten posts, searching for anything that hinted at this plan. In one clip from years earlier, Dave had said, "Some places deserve a second chance." It seemed harmless then, but now fans replayed it like prophecy. The idea that he'd gone back to an abandoned claim and struck something massive was too compelling to ignore. Rumors spread faster than fact, and every whisper, every blurred photo became another piece of the story. Then, a single Facebook photo added fuel to the blaze. A passerby at a small-town diner near the Montana-Oregon border snapped a picture with 3 men sitting in the corner booth, faces familiar to anyone who had followed Gold Rush. Dave Turin's Lost Mine 1 was his former mechanic, another the plant operator, and the third had been his right-hand man during the Colorado season. They weren't hiding, but they weren't talking either. The caption said, "Old crew reunion in town today." In the photo, one of them wore a weathered Dozer Dave cap, sun-faded, grease-stained, clearly used, not for nostalgia, but for work. Locals who recognized them said they kept to themselves, but mentioned something curious when asked what brought them back together. "The old man's back in business," one said with a grin, before changing the subject. Another, after a few drinks, told a regular that the pocket vein finally opened up. In miner language, that meant one thing: a section of ground so rich it changes everything. Within hours, the photo was everywhere. Fans dissected every corner of the image, the coffee mugs, the wall calendar, even the dirt on their boots. It wasn't just the faces that mattered, but the timing. The photo had been taken just days after the mysterious refinery shipment was logged. It lined up too neatly to be coincidence. The possibility that the old Lost Mine crew had quietly regrouped under the radar and maybe even restarted their operation at Devil's Gate was enough to send speculation into overdrive. By the next week, the small diner refused interviews. The owner said she'd been asked to take the photo down, claiming it was causing trouble for good men who just wanted to work. But by then, the damage, or the legend, was done. The gold world had its mystery, and it had a name: Dave Turin's Hidden Comeback. Meanwhile, in nearby mining camps, people started sharing stranger stories. One miner claimed he'd been working a small lease just a few miles east of Devil's Gate when, late one night, he heard something echo across the canyon, shouting, cheering, like a crew celebrating a big find. He said it came from deep within the gorge, bouncing between the cliffs. It lasted only a minute or two, but long enough to make him pause his work. That same night, others noticed floodlights cutting through the fog above the valley, glowing until dawn. No one saw trucks leaving, no machines moving, but the energy was unmistakable. Something significant had happened out there. For miners, that kind of outburst only means one thing: pay dirt, a layer so rich it breaks weeks of frustration in a single bucket load. The following morning, faint trails of tire prints led out of the site and disappeared down the old service road. Someone had worked through the night and pulled out fast. Within a few days, the whispers hardened into stories. Word spread that Dave had struck a pocket richer than anything shown on television. Deeper, cleaner, and closer to the main fault line than anyone thought possible. The site, they said, wasn't massive, but the yield per yard was staggering. A few insiders even claimed the first cleanup had already been smelted and transported discreetly. Its estimated worth nearing the $100 million mark. Nobody could prove it, but that didn't stop the rumor from running wild. More clues followed. Supply deliveries to nearby towns spiked suddenly. Fuel, water, heavy machine parts, then dropped back to zero within a week, as if an entire camp had been built, run, and dismantled in record time. Even local hotels reported crews checking in for just 3 nights, paying in cash, then disappearing without a trace. Everything pointed to a rapid extraction, a strike executed and shut down before word could leak. Those close to Dave describe him as a man driven by closure. The Devil's Gate operation, if it's real, would be the culmination of everything he'd spent decades chasing. The perfect pay streak, hidden in the ruins of a mine that beat the last generation. And if he truly found it, that silence afterward makes sense. No celebration, no press release, just a quiet victory shared among the few men who believed in the ground enough to return. By the time anyone realized how much gold might have moved, it was too late. The canyon was empty again, the camp erased, the floodlights gone. But the evidence, the refinery dust, the sightings, the cheers in the night, all point to one undeniable truth. Something enormous came out of Devil's Gate. To outsiders, it looks like myth, another ghost story from the goldfields. But to those who've watched Dave Turin's entire journey, it feels like a promise kept. After years of chasing other people's dreams on camera, maybe he finally found the one that was truly his. And somewhere deep in the rocks of that canyon, the earth finally gave up the gold it owed him. For a brief moment, it seemed like the legend had broken free, that Devil's Gate had finally told its last secret. But almost as soon as whispers began spreading, everything went silent again. The noise, the tracks, the glow from the hillsides, all gone as if wiped clean overnight. Weeks passed, and whatever had happened in that remote stretch of canyon seemed to evaporate overnight. Where the road once wound down toward Devil's Gate, county maintenance crews arrived without warning and sealed it off. No announcement, no construction signs, just a fresh barrier and a detour map stapled to a wooden post. Locals who'd driven that route for years said the change came fast, almost too fast, as if the decision had been made long before the trucks showed up. A few days later, satellite imagery began circulating online. Independent sleuths who'd been tracking the site frame by frame noticed something strange. The disturbed ground that once showed tire ruts, camp outlines, and a newly carved drainage channel suddenly appeared clean, almost pristine. The contrast between 2 sets of satellite captures, taken barely 2 weeks apart, was eerie. The scarred ground had been replaced by undisturbed brush and soil. It didn't look restored, it looked erased. The creek that had cut through the claim now ran a different course, its bend smoothed out and redirected upstream. Environmental restoration on that scale usually takes permits, equipment, and time, but no such paperwork appeared in county records. The entire site seemed wiped from the map, every piece of infrastructure removed. No tailings piles, no trailers, no fuel drums, nothing. For a place that had once pulsed with machinery and floodlights, it was as though the canyon had swallowed the evidence whole. Yet for every image that vanished, the questions multiplied. Gold that pure doesn't just disappear. It has weight, traceability, and a chain of custody that eventually surfaces in the form of jewelry, bars, or private trades. Analysts who reviewed the refinery's earlier submission noticed an anomaly. The initial batch had been categorized under a private artisan exemption, meaning whoever sold it knew how to structure the transaction to avoid public listing. The documentation hinted at an experienced operator, someone who understood not just mining, but how to make gold invisible in plain sight. Speculation spread that the crew had dismantled everything intentionally to protect the source miners who'd worked with Dave in the past, said he'd always been obsessed with doing things right, with respecting the land and the history beneath it. Maybe this was his version of closure, cleaning up the ground once the job was done, leaving no trace for others to dig into. But others weren't so convinced. Some claimed private contractors, possibly under non-disclosure, had been hired to bury the main shaft and reseed the area. The logistics were military-grade, short windows of work, limited witnesses, total blackout. Still, digital detectives kept digging. On one of the lesser-known satellite archives, an earlier frame captured something missed by the rest. A series of rectangular ground cuts, too precise to be natural. They formed a grid near the creek bend, spaced evenly apart, as if test pits had been excavated and then rapidly backfilled. For geologists, that pattern was unmistakable. It meant coring someone had taken samples, possibly from the main ore zone, and removed them before the cleanup. Months passed without any further leads until a small estate auction in Helena, Montana listed an unassuming item under geological memorabilia. Lot number 192 was described as a wooden crate marked DG Core Sample. Most bidders ignored it until the crate was opened. Inside lay several core segments of quartz ore, each laced with visible veins of gold. The label's handwriting, captured in the auction catalog, drew immediate attention. Sharp, angular letters, distinctive loops, the same style seen in Dave Turin's old field notebooks from his early mining days, once shown briefly on Gold Rush. Someone had either imitated his script with uncanny precision, or it was the real thing. The crate never went public again. It sold to an anonymous bidder by phone for $75,000, an astronomical price for unverified core samples. The transaction lasted less than 2 minutes, and the buyer's representative requested immediate shipment under private handling. When journalists later asked the auction house about the item's provenance, they declined comment, citing confidentiality agreements. For those following the Devil's Gate mystery, it was a revelation wrapped in silence. Whoever bought that crate wasn't just collecting a relic, they were preserving a secret. In mining circles, rumors erupted that the samples weren't merely decorative. Some claimed they were part of a final assay from the hidden site, a test of ore quality so extraordinary it confirmed the canyon's legend. Once and for all, others speculated the crate had been left deliberately as bait to mislead anyone trying to trace the gold's true location. Whatever the truth, one thing was undeniable. Someone still had access to the source material, and they were protecting it at a high price. Then came the strangest development of all. Business filings under Dave Turin's name appeared quietly online. The company, newly registered and operating out of Oregon, listed its primary activity as heritage reclamation. To most, that sounded vague and bureaucratic. But in the mining world, it carries a specific meaning: reclaiming and rehabilitating old grounds privately, sometimes extracting remaining resources while restoring historical sites. It's a legal gray area, blending environmental restoration with discreet recovery. If the Devil's Gate operation had indeed been wrapped under such a purpose, it would explain everything: the secrecy, the cleanup, the disappearance. Dave never spoke publicly about the rumors. Interview requests went unanswered. Social media posts remained focused on family, faith, and community projects. But among miners, his silence said more than words. The man who once dug for others' lost fortunes might have finally found his own and chosen to protect it, not parade it. Even now, Geologists reviewing historical maps of the region can't find any trace of the site described by early reports. The coordinates no longer align with visible landmarks. The terrain seems subtly altered. The canyon exists, but the exact location of the supposed pay zone, gone. Drone footage taken months later shows nothing but scrubland and scattered boulders, as if time reset the ground itself. Still, fragments of the story linger. The refinery records remain sealed. The core crate vanished into private hands, and those who once worked beside Dave have quietly moved on, taking jobs in distant states. None deny their past, but none confirm the legend either. It's as though an unspoken pact binds them. Protect the find, protect the man who made it. In the end, what remains isn't evidence but legacy. The belief that somewhere beneath layers of reclaimed earth and redirected creek beds lies the last great discovery of a miner who refused to quit. Whether the $100 million figure was truth or folklore hardly matters now. What endures is the sense of finality, that after years of televised struggles and public setbacks, Dave Turin might have written his true finale in the soil itself. Some say the gold was melted, mixed, and sold off slowly, its origin erased by design. Others believe it still rests underground, untouched, sealed behind backfilled shafts, waiting for another generation to rediscover. But those who know mining history best will tell you, real legends don't leave proof, they leave questions. And beneath the silence of Devil's Gate, the earth still holds one that no one can answer. What did Dave Turin really find before the canyon closed its mouth for good?